Sounds good.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 11 of the Lift Free and Die Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates, and I'm returning with my friend Lee Boyce. Lee's been a prior guest on the previous incarnation of the podcast, but in the solo ones where I've taken over as solo host, it's Lee's first return trip, but I had to get him back. If you don't know who he is already, there's something wrong with you. He's a prolific writer, presenter. He does a lot of coaching work in our industry. He's an adjunct professor, educator in everything he does. And sadly, we had to cancel this year's Evolve Canadian Strength Symposium where Lee was due to have presented, which is part of our inaugural lineup last year. And in my future plans, so we'll be getting you back at some point when all this stuff settles down. So mostly, I just wanted to see what you've been up to. And given the restrictions on travel, I know you like presenting. How have you used this year well? How have you put your time into this year to make it still a successful year?
So I guess a lot of things have moved into the virtual space first and foremost. So we all know that. And as far as being a fitness professional in this space, that has moved a lot of stuff toward online coaching, for example. And so that maintained its strength and even picked up in terms of volume and on my end, just because of the fact that there's a lot of people out there who aren't necessarily comfortable, even if lockdown restrictions have been removed, to get back into gyms and start working out in person physically again. Other people, they might even be more into that idea. However, they've spent all their money stocking up their home gyms over the course of time. And so for that reason, they want to put it to good use. And they might be on a work from home protocol as well from the downtown core, for example, which is where I would operate out of a lot of the time. And so for that reason, they want the convenience factor to be in their favor. So yeah, all those reasons are what has made the push for online coaching a little bit more of a thing compared to before. Now, I'm still pretty busy with my in-person clients. I literally just finished a string of 5 in-person clients right now. But with that said, it has made for a transition in that front. Other than that, lots of writing. I've been keeping up with my articles and all that sort of thing. And the virtual delivery for the college of the courses that I'm teaching there, that has really been a new challenge for the entire faculty. So that is something that the semester has started as of the beginning of September. So we were dealing with that, and that's been going okay. And yeah, I guess that's really it. There's no speaking that I can do, and I'm not really doing too much. I'm not really into, I'm not going to lie, a lot of the giving presentations via Zoom and Skype and all that sort of thing. So I've kind of been turning down offers that have come that way, and that's kind of the way that it's been.
I know there's been a bit of that we had the NSCA provincial clinic that was supposed to go here in person. My buddy Jeff Aker runs that, so I know that they had done a live one, and I know Luca Hosfar's got a big event coming up and they're doing it virtually. He wanted to do it in person, but I guess it just wasn't feasible. For me personally, the virtual stuff, there's one inherent flaw, and I've talked about this relentlessly, is like I like the getting in and meeting people and the networking side of things, which is probably difficult, if not impossible, to do in a virtual room versus an in-person experience. So for me, I've just accepted this year and probably into next year for a certain chunk, I've lost the ability to go and do certain things. Like the travel, that sort of stuff is really off the table. So I just decided I'm going to reallocate my time and energy into other things that will set me up to be as successful as possible when we can get back to, and I hate language like new normal, but, whatever semblance of what things were like before. And I actually think it'll take a little while before, conferences that really blow up the way that they used to.
Right. I agree with that. Right now, at least here in Toronto, there's a cap of how many people can even be in a room together, which is something like, I believe with our gym, it was a capacity of 33 bodies in the room altogether. And that sounds like a lot, but in a gym space, that really isn't a lot at all. It's pretty small. So whereas we were at a maximum of 50 people allowed in one space at a time, those restrictions were brought back very recently to, I believe it's 25 indoor and 10 indoor and 25 outdoor. That was the rule. So with all that said, could be a while before, a conference that features a couple of hundred people sitting in the same place to listen to a presenter speak can become a reality. And that forces people into the Zoom space or into the online space or whatnot, or it forces much smaller venues. And regardless of what it is, it's going to be a little bit of a transition for people in order to, be able to network and be able to sort of meet each other and communicate with one another, let alone in person, even virtually. It's a little bit of an uphill battle, but, we just have to wait it out, I guess, and see what happens.
And use the time wisely. There's something else too that have to take into consideration for anyone listening is everybody is in a different jurisdiction. So we have two things going on. One is certain cities and areas are more heavily impacted by this than others. I mean, New York, probably the worst in terms of the early surges. Toronto is probably in the middle of like having it a bit worse, certainly than Edmonton. Edmonton, probably one of the best places in North America for a major city. Our cases never really ever got out of hand. Of course the news will, say, oh, blah, there's this more this day. And, there's a certain type of mentality that's just going to freak out about it anyway. Be like, lock everything down. Meanwhile, there's all sorts of other consequences from that. And then there's each individual government's approach to it. Our government has been pretty strict and not, like just screwing the economy and not doing anything really drastic or draconian. And we've actually handled it really well. That's also because Edmonton, as far as is not a very densely populated city compared to, say, the downtown part of Toronto or, again, New York. So, there are going to be some people who are going to be more heavily impacted by this, A, just because there simply was more of a spread of this virus everywhere, and two, like, look at our friends who are gym owners in California right now. They've all been shut back down again, right? And, there's a lot of data supporting the fact that gyms have been overwhelmingly safe. So, one thing is the virus, but another thing is how the governments are responding to it. So, everybody's in a different situation, despite the insinuation that we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, there's a number of people that I can think of right now who are in sort of the jeopardy of maybe shutting down their gyms or have already done so. There are some very, very prominent fitness boot camp instructors and people like in that sort of section where it was 100% of what they did was the physical, group scenario kind of fitness. And so because of the fact that their doors were shut at first, and then on top of it, when the doors were reopened, there wasn't too much interest in returning because people were afraid to, or because of the other things I said about earlier, work from home and they're not around anymore and so on and so forth. Well, guess what? They're forced to just close up and call it a day. And whether they leave the industry altogether or try to take on some kind of a different work under the same umbrella, that's what they're stuck with doing. And it's very stressful and difficult for those people. And I feel for people who own gyms and, it's not something that's inexpensive in this city in any way, shape or form. And if you were deferring a lease payments for 6 months or for 4 months or 5 months or however long lockdown was in your situation, it means that you have a pretty massive bill to have to pay back after the fact. So it's a tough situation for small business owners and gym owners. I have colleagues and friends who have been lobbying to try to get a little bit more support in that realm from the government in order to sort of make things a possibility to stay open and stay running. Unprecedented times, and so because of that, people are trying to scrounge as much as they can and do whatever they can to make this still work. But it is definitely very, very, very challenging for them to do so.
Yeah, no, I feel terrible for all those people. There's certain kinds of things like, imagine owning a small spin studio that ran on, running on fairly low margins. You're screwed because if there's one type of environment that is probably going to be really hard to manage, you're going to have to put up all kinds of barriers, is a small room with a large number of people packed in who are breathing hard, right? One-on-one resistance training in gyms, that stuff is really super straightforward. And my clientele, again, Edmonton being really, really tame comparatively to a lot of North America, my people have overwhelmingly felt very, very safe to return. I've been as busy as I've ever been. I still do a little bit of virtual, one of my guys, he would like to be back, but his sister who he lives with is so, like, I don't want to use the word paranoid because that sounds, negative, but she's so worried about anything that he's not even allowed to go to the gym. So he actually bought a squat rack setup and I just train him over video once a week. So he's pretty happy, all things considered.
That's good. I don't have too many people who I've done straight virtual coaching with, but what I have had is a lot of my clients at the time anyway transitioned into what I'll call online coaching, where they'll take care of programming that I provide for them and whatnot. Same as what I always offer, where the online stuff is concerned. And so then they'll have their gym that's stocked with certain things, or they might get certain things. And sure, their gym might be a little bit more poorly equipped compared to a full scale gym that we work out of, but at least it's something to tide them over until lockdown ends. And again, the vast majority of them have already returned, and I'm only waiting on a couple other people who are going to get back to it in person. But it's the reality of the situation, and everybody's not going to be as comfortable as everybody else with what's going on, and whether or not they're neurotic about it, or whether or not they're just mildly sort of concerned about it. And there are a lot of moving parts and factors to factor in as well. For example, how old are the clients, first of all, and also how much contact do they have with their parents and their grandparents and stuff like that, depending on who we're talking to, and how worried does that make them, right? So, if it's a single one-person individual who lives 500 miles away from their grandparents or parents, then they might be a little bit more lax with it, right? If it's somebody who's already 50 and then they have an 87-year-old father and an 85-year-old mother and whatnot, they see them every week, maybe the gym's not the place they want to be right now, especially not on a regular basis, even though it might be clean, it might be safe, but you got a lot of bodies in there, you got more germs that are circulating around, people have to be more on top of staying sanitary and so on. So it can definitely leave a taste in certain people's mouth that might not be the same as the taste that might have in your mouth, my mouth, or someone else's. So it's very, very case by case, and personalities are really gonna show their differences when a situation and scenario like this is surfaced, and we're seeing that, and I'm seeing that, and everybody has a sort of a different opinion on this also. We just have to sort of wait it out and see what happens and hope for the best. And here in Toronto, we're hoping for not another lockdown, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know that your government is rattling sabers about the possibility, whereas my government here has been very assertive in suggesting that it won't. So, and that's tough for business owners in a situation where there is the threat of another lockdown, especially if it's a business that you feel like you can operate safely. So complicated stuff for sure. And going back to your comments about, each individual and their situation, it's really important that we respect where they are, how they feel about it, and their concerns. Because, yeah, I've got one older client I hadn't trained recently, but she's got an elderly mother that lives with her, and she's quite adamant that she's never stepping foot in a gym ever again. Now, personally, I think that's a touch of an overreaction, but I understand it completely and I respect that. So that's an individual that, I'm positive and supportive with, but there's no like, hey, no, you need to come back to the gym, this is good for you. It's like, nah, like she's actually been outdoors working out a whole lot. So I kind of leave her to that.
Right. Yeah, I got a couple clients as well who are saying like that kind of thing, just like, I don't feel proper doing this yet. I don't want to come back into the gym just yet. And, maybe they're going to start in the new year. Like maybe it is what it is. And, and it's just, the reaction has to be, okay, take your time whenever you're ready, and I'll be here for you when you come back, because at the end of the day, these hiatuses are still supreme examples and displays of loyalty on the client's behalf as well, because they do prepare to come back at some point, and they could easily say, I'm not coming back and I'll just figure out my own thing, and thanks for your time and whatever. But knowing that they're actually telling you the plan that's being put in place, that should be sort of heartwarming for you, that your retention is that good, that they have the intent of coming back and returning to hire your services or contract or retain your services again. So a way to look at it, more of a glass half full, and it allows you to have a little bit more respect for the decisions too.
I just recently had a small handful of my people who've been holding out for various reasons, and they're all just starting to jump back in now and quite eager to do it. So everybody arrives at it in their own time. The talk about online training, this is something that's dominated our industry long before COVID, this sort of push. And Jonathan Goodman is kind of, I guess, one of the visionaries behind, seeing that this was going to be a trend. And we know that a lot of the trainers in our world, I think on one end, have this idea that they want to get away from the gym floor. They want to go totally online. They want to have this freedom, live like, John was traveling around for a bit before he had his kid, or a guy like Menu Henselmans who moves a different country all the time. And while I think that a few, of the top end people in the industry can actually pull that crap off, I think that's a bit more of a pipe dream. But for me, and I suspect for you as well, I like being on the gym floor, and I offer a little bit of online training as a complement to a full-time in-person coaching business. And I would rather be a Charles Staley type, where I'm still, what is Charles now, 60, still crushing deadlifts and chin-ups better than I can do, and still be working with my in-person clientele. So where's your head at with that? And I guess I'll open this up into a bigger question. Like, where do you see yourself with all the effort you're putting into, brand development, you're writing all this stuff. What's the kind of long game ambition for you? Or are you just riding the wave?
It's a lot of riding the wave for sure. But I would say that in the bigger picture, it seems like kind of naturally, organically, I've sort of made tiptoe into the world of being more of an educator and being on the education side of things. I don't want to like jinx anything or whatnot, but that is definitely where things have gone and where they've been going and where they seem to still continue to go. Whether it was the transition from just being a trainer and writer to trainer, writer, and now I'm speaking and I'm running these kind of, workshops and doing clinics and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's helping a little bit more for professional development of other people in the industry. So that now has allotted a certain amount of my time in each year. And then on top of that, it was those two things, plus now I'm teaching at college, right? And so being at the college now and spending 2-3 days per week there and working with students who are going to be entering the industry and so on. Now, all of that stuff is now like a piece of what occupies my work week. And I just noticed that it's occupying, sort of progressively more and more of my time per week, or per year, or whatever you want to call it, which suggests to me that it's only going to get a little bit stronger in that department. And like you, I still want to be the person who is walking the talk in a sense, or being out on the gym floor in the trenches, because I have a very, very strong feeling about maintaining your relevancy and your consistency with that side of things to lend to your capabilities as an educator, as a teacher, as a trainer, as a fitness expert. I think that's a really, really huge part of it, and I don't ever want to lose that. I just know that those values will shift a little bit in terms of how much time each thing will get. Whereas if you talk to me when I was 22, I'm 33 now. When you talk to me when I was 22, I was working with 11 clients, 12 clients in a day. Now at 33, I'm working with 4 or 5 clients in a day, on a heavy day. And then, by the time maybe when I'm 43, maybe I'll work with 1 or 2 clients or 3 or 4 clients in a week. I don't know. So it's definitely something where the education side of things will open up a little bit more of my time, I think, and the other side of things is going to sort of shift itself down, and I don't want either to disappear.
That makes sense, and I'm riding the wave too. Like, I don't necessarily see me going hard into the educator space, although a lot of my social media kind of speaks to even this podcast is something that ends up being fairly educational to a generation of trainers coming up through and established trainers. So, and I think a lot of the people who've been really successful in our space may not have necessarily had a clear destination or ambition. It just sort of worked out that way as they gained proficiency. Like, one of the comments you made about spending more time in education is, it sort of sounded like you hinted at the fact that you found yourself liking it, and then I think you're going to gravitate towards the things that you enjoy a lot more.
Sure.
And coming back to the idea of online training, I think it's a good idea to be able to do it. I think it's a good idea to do it well and offer it. But for me, it's not my passion, and I keep the numbers limited so I do a really good job with the people who I do have. That's important to me. If I was like, PJ Street, who writes for T Nation like we do, PJ is exclusively online. I think he has somewhere north of 100 online clients. And to me, that's like, holy Jesus, I couldn't even imagine. But he loves it. He's very engaged with it. He talks about making it more personal than personal training. And if that's where your passion lies and you're doing a really good job, great. I don't think everybody needs to make a hard pivot into online training. I think in-person training is still going to be extraordinarily successful and viable. More and more we do know about, the true impact of, COVID. I almost hate saying the word, like it's dominating our airwaves. And we will also have, more medical technology and intervention, and we'll just have a better handle on controlling it to the point where more and more people will feel safe. I mean, gyms are busy. Like, don't kid yourself. Gyms are busy in most places. Maybe I'm a little biased because I'm in a jurisdiction that is less of a threat of spread. We haven't seen as much of it, but I know that people want to be in gyms, right? There are places where there's restrictions that people are literally fighting to get them open, or they've opened them and they're getting fined, and they're just like, well, fuck the governor or whatever. You're actually seeing stuff like that in places like New Jersey. So I don't know how I feel about that stuff. But people want to be in them. So I don't think anyone needs to be afraid that the online training, or sorry, the in-person training business is going to die off. I mean, I think that's ludicrous.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I have to say this is that in other interviews, I've been asked that question of what do you think is really going to turn, like, where do you think this is going to go in terms of like the personal training world and like the in-person one-on-one coaching world and so on? Like, what do you think the next thing is? And do you have any kind of advice or whatever for, trainers who are, just starting, to work with clients or whatever, like given COVID-19 is a thing. And, the thing that I see picking up more steam or as much steam as online coaching to me is in-home coaching.
Hmm.
And you see, like, that means that, yeah, you're personal training somebody, you're not in a gym, but you're still physically there with them. It's a one-on-one setting, so there's not much risk, especially if you're both testing negative for COVID-19. And at the same time, you're using the equipment that's available to the person that they might have stocked up during their quarantine time. Making yourself mobile and having a vehicle, for example, to get around from one place to another, I think that would be something that somebody would be remiss not to consider and, consider as a big portion of their business in the next, 5 years or so, because I do believe that that will pick up a whole lot of steam compared to before. And, having somebody who comes to you, a trainer who comes to you and works with you in your home, with your setup, with your equipment in the area that's, a territory you like, and that's familiar to you with, just all that convenience being, just like respected. I think that that's going to be something that really picks up steam. I just can't see it not, especially with work from home protocols where people aren't going to be back in a certain area of the city. And a lot of people, especially older folks, a lot of them don't live very close to where they work, at least not in this city. And so it's going to be something that they will look for. And we got to be ready for that, because whereas a gym might not be the thing, I think that personal training will still be a thing. And it's just going to be a matter of where the personal training exists.
Two considerations. The first one with mobile, you have to drive between clients, so you no longer stack your hours. So that means you will have to be able to charge more for your time or make it worthwhile, which means you have to get good at targeting or getting access to a more, affluent clientele on average, right? And that's, someone might be like, oh, I want to offer training. Well, yes, you want to make it accessible to everybody, but it's also something that in order to be able to viably do it, you have to take into consideration, because you can now train, in theory, half as many people. And you have to take into consideration traffic patterns and how far each client are away from each other. So build that into it and be prepared to charge more for your time, and then find clients who are comfortable paying for it. A second thing is, and this is what I've also done, is the other side of the in-home. You put the gym in your home, right? So that your clients can come to you. So I live in what's essentially a suburb in Edmonton, but it's not very far away from most people. It's accessible by the big Beltway road we have. And I built that gym, during COVID for myself and to work with clients. And I've maintained my evenings. So there's a gym that I contract out of All Strength. So I go in there for mornings and afternoons, and I love it. It's been going really well. And then my evenings, I train clients at home. And a lot of my clients either have a strong preference for one or the other. There's a few that just go wherever it fits them in, because they're one of my guys is a doctor, and he can train almost any time of day depending on his schedule. He's happy to go to both. But the in-home allows me to stack, hour upon hour upon hour. Again, that same doctor, sometimes he'll message me and be like, can, we do a Saturday evening time, like, 6 or 7. And if I don't have anything already planned, I'm like, fuck yeah, just drop over, I'll train you for an hour. It pays very, very well. I don't have to go anywhere. And he lives pretty close by anyway. So I found that having a home gym setup's been great. Now, if you don't own a house or have that kind of space, you're limited. I've been fortunate that I do own my home, and I had a full basement to just start setting up in. But it's something worth looking at as well, if you don't want to have to worry about it. And of course, there's whatever the government says you're allowed to do versus not allowed to do. But, in your own home, it's a lot easier to pull off, especially if the government has said, hey, all these businesses have to close.
Yeah, I've got a couple of friends who have very successfully started a home gym setup, where they have like a 2-car garage, for example, and they transform that garage into a nice fully, you know, rubberized floors. They mirror the place, they heat the place, and so on. They get progressively more and more good pieces of equipment that are useful to go into that garage, and then all their clients just come to them. And, you know, when you're one of those kinds of trainers, because I find like it's sort of like a different realm in the training world, and like business starts coming to you that you didn't know, at least from what I've heard from them. It comes to you and you never expected it to come to you. You always wonder what's going to happen when your existing clients that you move over into your home are no longer available or whatever. But, you know, word goes around, and then all of a sudden in the neighborhood, people are interested and so on. And so then this person tells, and then all of a sudden you have a whole list of people, and you got a waiting list even. And this is the good thing about having sort of like an in with like the kind of the suburbs sort of thing, and having like an in-home kind of deal, whether it is an in-home where you're going to them or where they're coming to you. And, you know, it's, to me, that side of things, especially if you're in an area of the city or you're working with people in an area of the city that you normally wouldn't touch or that normally don't get touched by too many trainers, it can be a real incentive, at least for me. And I know that in the event that I start doing, you know, a lot more of that sort of training where it is, you know, you make yourself mobile and you go to their homes, you know, all it takes is being on one really rich street and you work with one really rich clientele on that rich street. And then all of a sudden they tell their neighbors, and then they tell their neighbors, and they tell them. And then all of a sudden you can load up 2 days out of the week where you're just going straight from home to home right there in the same place. And, you know, your travel costs are down. You're billing an arm and a leg for the session, rightfully so, of course. And you're doing what you should be doing. And it's and it goes great. And then, you know, you have a great network, and it's all about building contacts and making having a good pool of people behind you. And you could make a solid living and be pretty comfortable with everything.
Yeah, because don't stay in that rigid box of the way things were before. I mean, I worked for 6.5 years on a commercial gym floor, and you know, I was kind of very boxed into that. Like, all right, this is the way it is. And when I first started out, there were less options. Right, online training was barely a thing outside of, you know, like the top tier trainers that we sort of were reading all their stuff, and they were doing it before it became a popular thing. But now we have all these different options. There's way more stuff that you can possibly do between online, virtual, hybrid models, in your home, in other people's homes, that, yeah, like you're saying, like consider all these things, figure out the stuff that probably works best for you, and you're just more robust, you're more resilient to the things. I've got an article in the works that, if anybody's read the book Anti-Fragile, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, which is one of my favorites, philosophically, right now, I think we are seeing a tier of trainers looking to leave the industry. And I believe, and my article's about this being a really great time to stay. I don't know if it's a great time to enter the industry, but the ones who are serious will figure it out. But if you manage to get through COVID and do okay, and you still didn't get wiped out, your clients were engaged with you, they went online, they did virtual, they came back, and you're not starving, you're somehow able to keep going and pay your bills. I'm praying, and I hope, and I think this is probably the worst thing that will happen to us in terms of the effect on our industry in a long time, these lockdowns and the scare of this. If you got through this, you're probably fine. And every trainer at some point has worried about, and I have worried about this, and people are going to hear this and go, really, holy shit, about all of your clients just up and just being gone in, like, say, a 2 week to a month period. Of course, it's never happened. You get that little, oh, this week's a little slower, you get a little nervous about it. And the illusion is that these salaried, you know, secure, quote, air quotes, jobs are better. That's nonsense, right? A salary job, how many people do you know lost their salary job during this or just got laid off? I'm in, you know, Alberta, so how many oil field jobs all of a sudden just poof, gone, and nobody's hiring engineers right now? So if you think that that stuff is secure and stable, I would argue that while there's variability to our income, we have great upside to our income, and we can see the shocks and the shifts in the trends. And this is the whole point within the book Anti-Fragile, that we can detect that stuff early and we can change our behavior. We can change our tactics. We can do all those different offerings that we just talked about. We can put more effort into asking for referrals. And we are very, very unlikely, barring you doing something astonishingly stupid that gets you canceled, from losing all of your clientele in one shot. And fuck it, I mean, I won't say any names, but we know people in our greater sphere who've gotten into fairly high level trouble that there's, been outcries and outrage or whatever. And those people, after sort of initial like fuss about it, it died down and they're still cruising fine. So we are surprisingly robust in what we're doing. And I'm encouraging the people who are nervous about, their income and worried about, getting clients. I think staying here is probably the best thing you could possibly do versus trying to go out and become a paramedic or, something else. Now, if you just don't have the stomach for the relentless effort to build your business brand and that kind of work, or the schedule, then sure, I understand it. But I do not think that for income security, it's a good reason to leave.
Yeah. So a lot that you just said there, and part of it that I have to agree with, if for sure, is the fact that it's going to expose, and this is what I'll add, is that it's going to definitely expose who's got the most passion for the industry as well. I don't personally see, there are a lot of things that you and I could go and do, but I just don't see any possibility. It's not even a thought that I would leave this industry to try to do something else instead. I do think that there's a lot of business to be gained for staying around, first and foremost. But second of all, like, I'm the type of person who's going to keep on trying something until it really proves itself that it's like I'm on rock bottom here before I'm out. And that's just my method of operation and how I do things. And I guess that's sort of what speaks to like where I'm at in the industry as well, and what I've been doing and how much success I've attained so far. That's what I attribute it to, is the stick-to-itiveness, that, being persistent and staying on top of what you do. And like, I'm just like, yeah, you diversify your approach, of course. You go mobile, you go virtual, you start doing more blogging, and you start curating content and so on. All those kinds of things can go a long way. But on top of it, you see how you can just do more in-person training sessions in a different way. And maybe there are opportunities that you've always been too busy to even look for, because of the fact that you've been stuck in one groove doing what you do, and doing it well. But this could be the wake-up call that a lot of trainers need to get diverse and explore other avenues within the industry and under the umbrella of fitness and personal training. Something that I made a little blog about not too long ago, in the heat of COVID-19, trying to look at things from the bright side and looking at things from a little bit more of a positive perspective for both lifters, trainers, and clients. So for everybody.
I think there's something else embedded within where you and I are in the industry. And I don't think that we're on the same level. You've been doing this, despite the fact you're quite a bit younger than me, you've been doing this longer. I've been playing catch up on some stuff. But both in the space of writing, creating, and I know that with our followings, we end up putting a lot of stuff out there geared towards other coaches and trainers. Now, there's an important piece of wisdom. It's like, know the audience you're speaking to. Like, we work with clients, and you and I both put out a lot of information that's directed to the end user. We're also speaking to a lot of the other coaches. Now, while actually sometimes other coaches do come and work with me, I'm not trying to market to other coaches anything other than listen to my podcast, go read our articles on T-Nation, that sort of stuff. Hey, come to my conference once a year. Yeah. But those are not big parts of my business. My income is based around my in-person coaching and a little bit of online. But I believe there is a lot of value in being, the best way I could say, is an industry authority. So when someone who is considering training with us, and they're either connected to someone who follows us or works with us, or they're a follower or an old friend who's still on Facebook, and you see the trainer who's, in the trenches, 3 or 4 years into the business, or the first couple of years, versus that trainer who's been doing it over a decade. Because literally today, this month is my 10-year anniversary in the industry. Starting today, so I'm going to have some fun with that a little bit. So you get someone who's literally a decade in or more, who a lot of their brand and media is about education and here's how to be successful in the industry. Well, you're an industry authority. That's very appealing to the brand new client. Okay, so that's like, who am I going to go to? Oh, I'm going to go to the commercial gym trainer, or I'm actually going to go to this guy who is an expert in the field, because they're going to assume that you're going to be pretty good at actually taking care of a brand new client as well. So I don't think you can skip some of the steps along the way to put yourself in that position. Again, like you said, it's about writing articles and creating long form content and building brand. But for anyone listening, while I still think as your career emerges, your message still needs to be overwhelmingly to the potential end user, it is a good idea to start creating some information that is educational. If you want to get into this kind of space and, you know, get to where guys like me and Lee are, right? Like, again, if you aspire to write for T Nation, then there's a lot of steps you have to take along that way. And writing and demonstrating the ability to write and take those training ideas and articulate them into an accessible form, that's essential.
It's something that has really changed in its landscape over the last decade. I've been writing since I was 20. My first article came out when I was 22. And at 33, the amount of, let's say, people who have entered that space, because of how much more digital information is being consumed compared to the way that it was in 2009, it's just more rampant. It's more prevalent. And it's also something that more people have gotten into, even if they're, you know, regardless of what their capabilities or their background or their education or their skill level at actually doing the thing have been. And, you know, that should be something that encourages a lot of people to get into it, because there are far fewer kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? There are far fewer strictures or restrictions or stigmas that are attached to, okay, well, this person misspelled this, or this person has poor sentence structure on that, or whatever it is. You know, social media is a great culprit for all of that, in that now everybody has a platform to put out their opinions, to say what they want to say, and to say what they think, whether it's in video format, whether it's in written format, or whatever. They make their posts. So now everybody has a platform to write on. It's a question of what you decide to write about. And so, you know, using that social media to your advantage and putting out good quality content, or talking about what you believe in, or putting a demonstration out there video wise that shows that you are walking the talk and that you're out here in the trenches doing what you do, it's going to go a long way in terms of creating that evergreen content that people are going to consume, and give you more respect, and give you more respect for, and add a level of credibility to your stuff. And it's, you know what, like, even since I got an Instagram account, which was in 2018, which is 6 years behind the crowd, the amount of business that turned things into for me in some way, shape, or form, whether it was somebody who wanted me to write for their publication, or whether it was somebody who wanted to train with me physically, or whether it was a new online client who wanted me, or I have the thing where I have a Fix My Form, which is just a little quick thing where somebody submits videos to me and I can give them a form check. So all of those different avenues have definitely become helped, or they've become enhanced in some way, shape, or form as a result of having that platform, that single platform that I added to my arsenal, for lack of a better term, and have it as part of my social media. And, you know, we got to take advantage of that, because that's the world that we live in now. And it's something that a lot of eyes are on, a lot of people's eyes are. And so we should use that to our advantage, and it's going to only help our cause. And it's looking a little bit more speculative or spectacle, or it's a little bit more skeptical, I should say, when somebody doesn't have any of those things and they're trying to really do this in the industry. It's unfortunately, that's the real world that we live in now, is that, like, okay, so it's not, why do you have an Instagram? Why do you have Facebook? Why do you have Twitter for all this fitness stuff? It's more so, why don't you? How come you're not on these platforms and you're trying to really, really put out and make a name for yourself in the fitness industry? Word of mouth is great and it's powerful, but it can only go so far sometimes. And especially to be reached, or to have some kind of a reach that is international, it's going to be even more important to have some kind of an online presence, or create one for yourself via the content that you put out there and that you create.
And you were one of the people I asked when I put together an article, which is still unpublished. It should be published sometime next couple of weeks on True Coach. That's where I like to do my career writing now. And it was like, you know, you and 5 other people who have built really successful followings on their social media. Anyway, so when everybody gets a chance to read that one, you'll see kind of what Lee's advice is and how he did it, and how you went about your philosophies to it. And I agree with you. This is something that I realized earlier this year, late last year. I was like, okay, you know, I'm doing all these other things. You know, there's a podcast, there's writing for, you know, big publications, and then there's my coaching. But in the grander scheme of things, as silly as the metric of who has more Instagram followers should be, this is how people think. So I thought, okay, I need to get on Instagram on a regular basis, be consistently creative, and work to reach more people. And I've had a massive amount of growth from where I started to where I am now. My goal, I keep saying, is, to get to that 10K mark, because I like the idea of the swipe up function. And at first, the pace is like, oh, it'll be sometime next year. But right now, the pacing might be my goal. My stretch goal is Christmas, and I'll hit that 10K. And it's been a fun thing. And I realized it's actually really easy and fun to create all this stuff for social media. It's a really great exercise in editing and finding the right wording on things and what's engaging. So that's a skill that, you need in any form of communication, whether it's long form, talking to clients, selling to clients, getting them to buy into what they need to do to change their lives, and interactions and networking within the industry. So I think it's a good exercise if you have the bandwidth to do it. And the ideas can come from your everyday. And I make sure that I write things down. The post I put up today was something that a client of mine said yesterday. And I'm like, hang on, I got to write this down. This gives me a great idea. And if you're missing those things, you're missing all these opportunities to share those ideas. And oftentimes it's something that's so ubiquitous that everybody else goes, yeah, fuck, I've seen that too. And then someone shares it, and then it just takes off on a life of its own. And some big account shares it. Next, you wake up and you got 400, 500 new followers. But growing an Instagram, I think, is actually a really smart idea right now. And I don't think Facebook's going anywhere. I really don't. I think it's, the younger generation is not doing too much with it. They're on Instagram. I mean, I don't advocate, hey, you have to be on TikTok, you have to be on Snapchat. But I think Instagram is probably going to be fairly stable for a really long time. And they've shown that every time there's an upstart like Snapchat, they do stories. TikTok, now Instagram has Reels. So I think Instagram, with Facebook's backing, is probably still going to stay a really relevant platform, especially when it comes to video, image-based stuff. So, if you're on it, I do think it's worthwhile to be fairly consistent with it. Consistency trumps all. Quality of information is like a close second. They're intertwined. But you're leaving something on the table if you don't make the effort to reach more people, because like you said, that brings in more business and more clientele and more eyes on your educational stuff. And as silly as it is a metric of credibility. We look at someone who has, in our space, who's a good example? Look at a guy like Joe DeFranco. There's a generation finding him, and Joe's got, I think, a couple 100,000 Instagram followers. Now, we know Joe because the guy's a fucking legend in our world. He's a smart guy, brilliant trainer, business owner. But there's going to be a generation of people who find him as like, hey, this guy is pretty jacked, and he's got a couple 100,000 followers, and he trains Triple H from the WWE, and that's the metric. Then they get in there, then they see all the quality of the stuff. So, but still, as much as a vanity metric, it is still a very real metric in the eyes and minds of humans who make, quick first impressions based on, and honestly, it trickles down into how trainers look. And there's that whole argument, I don't want to get into it, about, should a trainer be fit or in shape? That's always a dirty mess of a conversation, but it would be naive to dismiss it as saying it's irrelevant, as much as only the knowledge should matter. The first impression is eyes, from someone who's coming in to work with you, can make a difference. So I'll sort of leave it at that, because it's definitely not a black and white, discussion.
It's not a black and white discussion. And to your earlier points as well, I think that with social media, the one thing that I think is really good about it is that you could kind of tailor your as of the type of content you decide to put out. If you want more of the demographic to be sort of geared towards, whatever, how strong you are and how awesome you are at training, or about your academic advice, or people who are struggling with rehab issues and they have certain questions with regards to that, postnatal pregnancy stuff, people who are, dealing with like insecurity issues and body image issues, or had recovered from some kind of disorder, you can create a little bit of a vein with your content based on what content you put up there. And, it might even sort of be a little bit stronger of a way for you to pull that kind of crowd in, compared to if you were just only trying to do it in person. So I think that being able to tailor things in that regard and sort of have a focused but organic at the same time growth of the right kind of followers or the right kind of following is going to be it's a huge benefit of using social media, Instagram in specific, especially. You know, when you have articles and you have things that you're putting out there and you have blogs that you're making and you have content that's all sort of following the same kind of rhetoric the entire time, and just under the same kind of umbrella of what narrative you try to adopt to, it's going to really keep that consistency up, and people are going to know what to expect, and people who share it with other people are going to probably share it with other people who are in the same boat, and then you know, and then you got a great thing going on. And so with me personally, like, I like to talk about, I have my Tall Guy Tuesdays. I make sure that I do it every single Tuesday, no matter what. And so I have something for lifters who are sort of built and shaped like me, longer limbs, taller body, total body height, and so on. And so there's something that sort of addresses that, and a heavier build, a heavier scale weight. So those kinds of things, I think they can provide that extra value, and they can make, you know, I'll call it a cult following, for lack of a better term, where there's a niche market that they really, really like certain things that you put out just for them. And the rest of my content is really based around really that education. Here's something you can learn about fitness. Here's something you haven't thought about. Here's an outside the box way to apply this principle, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, it fits into what we were talking about earlier in terms of which direction my own stuff is going with regards to the education side of things. So even if I tailor my social media toward the education side of things and less toward, oh, check out how much I can lift, or I did a PR in my squat today, that's cool too, but it doesn't occupy too much space on my Instagram or on my social media feeds. On top of it, you know, you push your articles and say, I just got this published that speaks to the points that I was making in these posts. Well, great. And, you know, that's the beauty of this sort of thing, is that you have full creative control over what you produce and how you want to present it. And that's going to tailor itself into creating the audience that you want for yourself. And maybe it might affect the rate of change you see if you're not maybe posing naked, for example, like a lot of people do to get a big following and garner a lot of attention. But the quality will speak for itself. And even if that rate of change or rate of development is a little bit slower paced, that's fine and good, because it'll sort of expose who's the real deal and who's not, and what kind of followers you have, or what kind of audience you grow, and how engaged and loyal they are, and how long they'll stick around, and all sorts of stuff like that. So yeah, no, I like what I'm doing with social media, and I like the fact that I have an Instagram, even though I've been really late to the parade. And yeah, I encourage a lot of other people to do the same thing, and just be wise and have a lot of conviction with what they do on it, and that's what's going to sort of make the difference for them.
The quality of the followers, as you said, got a couple of guys I chat with who follow me, and one's got a pretty big following, and what they built up is a lot of followers based on, you know, muscular builds, bodybuilding style builds, and they've expressed frustration with, you know, they get tons and tons of likes on posts where they show something shirtless. But then if they try to write something that's kind of more the style of the things you and I do regularly, then they don't get much engagement from it. So it becomes difficult. You know, you get caught up in the dopamine hits of, you know, and we shouldn't, but we do, about how well a post does. And then you notice that, well, they're trying to do the thing that they actually really care about, because they want to educate and share information, not getting much resonance with that type of post. And then they always double back to, here's another shirtless selfie. So breaking that cycle is tough, but it's created because you built a following based on those images. And I think a lot of women who post, you know, the sexier type of stuff are going to have that same problem. You're going to attract, you know, your hope is to educate people or to sell training programs, and your following is just there to look at you casually, then you're going to have a hard time selling to those demographics. So yeah, it could be a slower road, but I think appealing to the right audience and having a very engaged one, because I've gotten a lot of comments on how engaged my Instagram following is, and I actually take a great deal of pride in that. It's been really fun, and it's helped my social media grow rapidly. So I agree with you. That's the road that you probably should take. Forget the shortcuts. And I'm going to say this, and there's a lot of really credible people in our industry who organically built their following. But just because you see someone with a larger following and you've been struggling, you know, with maybe 2,000 or 3,000, that's where I started out for a while. You know, some of those bigger followings are purchased. They were seeded by buying followers. It's a common tactic. I personally haven't done it. I will never do it. And I'm actually proud of the fact that I was able to build. And once I reach the 10K mark and beyond, it's going to feel really good that, hey, I didn't fuck around with that shit. And there's a bot in my DMs every day trying to sell me this crap, right? That's the industry. But no, I won't take the shortcut. And if you're listening, you did it, then like, okay, there's no shame in that. But I'd say going forward, get on the right road, create the consistent, good quality information, and, build organically.
I've seen, like, it's so obvious, painfully obvious, when somebody goes and purchases following or just gets some kind of fabricated superfluous number that shows how many people are following them. And I can think of specific people from my city who are doing that. And all of a sudden, they had 1,100 followers last week, and then all of a sudden they have 15,000. Or they had 11,000 and all of a sudden they have 55,000. And it's like, that's not how this works. It doesn't happen like that unless you were literally on like Oprah or something yesterday. That's not how it works, right? And I know better than any other person how like the rate of change that you usually see, or what getting something popular out there, and how when that gets shared around, what kind of wave it usually sends in terms of how many new follows you'll get on an Instagram or on a Twitter or whatever it is. I'm a guy who's been published all left, right, and center, and I've had really wildfire articles, and I've had articles that have gone nowhere. I've had videos that get shared all over the place on big places, and I have videos that go nowhere. And so I know what kind of a wave a really successful hit will get. With all of that said, when you triple your audience, unless your audience was like 30 people at first, when you triple your audience in a day or over the course of one weekend, usually it cracks up to being that you purchased that audience. With that said, the easy way to tell as well, and peel back the layers, is when you just look at, okay, this person has 700,000 followers, but then they have 750,000 likes on a page or whatever, or they have 1,500 likes on one post that they've made, and then you see that there's only one comment, or you see that there's 2 comments. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't match up. There's no congruency there whatsoever. And that alone tells me that it's like, okay, this is a fake audience that's not, or their engagement is absolutely horrendous, but I don't think it's that. So I don't know, to me, it doesn't look good, and it's not something that I can ever do. And I just don't encourage anybody to do it if they're thinking about it, just because it only takes one slightly closer look for a person who's on your page to see that this is fabricated and this isn't real. And there's no shame in having a smaller number in your audience either, and keeping that true, because, you're building that organically, and, more and more eyes are going to be on your stuff if you do things the right way. And I remember before I started, and I only had Facebook at the time, but before I started really wanting to take like the content curation and so on seriously, and I started writing for T Nation, and I started writing for a Muscle Mag, which was a thing back at the time. I remember I had around maybe 800 or so Facebook friends, and I said, okay, well, now it's time to start the experiment. And so I removed so many. I got down to 260. That's what the number was when I started everything up. And, I've reached the capacity now in terms of that 5,000 limit or whatever, but it took time. When I released my first blog article in 2011, it was like, I put out the content and it was like, 3 likes, 5 likes. If I hit double digits, I was very, very happy with myself. And so, like, to think about things getting hundreds of likes now and so on, it's a great feeling to see, especially based on what type of content I would be putting out there and trying to get people to be interested in. My content is to be instantly popular, not only in terms of the opinions that are out there, but more so in terms of just what general content I decide. I write editorial pieces on my blog. I don't write about training content on my blog. I use it for different stuff. I talk about what I see in the industry. I talk about all kinds of things like that. I talk about the sociocultural aspects of fitness. This is boring material for most people who are out there. They want to read about fitness. And so for that reason, the fact that things like that are getting shared around, and my perspectives or my outside of the box kind of takes on things, and my counterintuitive posts that I make and articles that I share on my blog are getting that kind of attention, is something that you take a lot of pride in, because of the fact that it took time for you to build that attention for it. And it just means that you spend the years that are necessary in order to make that grow. And I think that anybody who's in that position right now, in terms of like they're getting started with that, they have the perfect platform to do it now. And they have the perfect kind of, they're in the perfect world to be able to do that, because the consumption of this kind of content and the amount of stuff that can more easily spread on social media now compared to back in 2010, 11, those kind of years, it's much stronger now. And so you just have many more avenues and many more opportunities for your content to really be seen. And so it might not be as hard, and that's a great thing. So yeah, I really think that all those things really matter. And you know, it all starts with just making sure you create content that's good and consistent, and you sort of carve your own niche, and you don't succumb to buying followers or using different things that will impress who are you trying to impress anyway? You know, somebody who wants to follow you as well. You want a good quality following instead, and that's the way to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in having a great quality following, and I really love. Like, I try to, in some way, shape, or form, you know, in every episode now, say to people, shoot me if you are following me, and you know you have any thoughts on this. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love a message, because I want to connect with more of you guys. Like, seriously, like I always make the time to respond to anyone who reaches out to me. So thanks for that. And meanwhile, I want you guys following Lee. Lee's become a really good friend of mine in the industry, and someone who is both is someone I look to right now, respect you. You're someone I've included in my conference as a speaker because I want to share you with more people. But I've learned from you and been reading your stuff for, I think, almost my entire career, right? I've been reading T Nation since, you know, I started 10 years ago, and you were on there in those fairly early days of that. So it's really cool right now to be able to connect here with you and the other people I've had on the podcast. And this also goes to anyone who's still trying to build and grow. I mean, I don't recommend everybody go and do a podcast just for the sake of doing it, but if you're interested and passionate and serious, the people who follow you, who aren't my engaged following or Lee's engaged following, they might be interested in what you have to say, and that following can grow. And it also will give you avenues to connect with the industry. I hate the term influencers, but certainly the industry leaders. You know, not everybody's gonna, you know, Ben Bruno just doesn't want to do podcasts, so he keeps saying, hey man, nah, I don't do that sort of thing. But a lot of the people that you follow are pretty down to earth, and they'll probably come and do your podcast for you. So it's a good way to connect and grow. And I still think networking with a lot of the people who are where you are at, but also the leaders, is going to serve you really well. So yeah, so go follow Lee. Lee, what's your Instagram handle off the top of your head?
It's Coach Lee Boyce, at Coach Lee Boyce, and you can find that across all three, actually: Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Coach LeeBoyce.
Yeah, and you have an email list, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so you can subscribe to my stuff as well, and then, you know, I got to get better. I have to lie. I'm not gonna lie. I have to get better at putting out stuff for the email list and whatnot, especially with what things I have sort of planned in that department in terms of, like, you know, eventually putting out products and whatnot. But yeah, I got to get on my own self for that.
And that just goes to show, though. I mean, I am terrible with email list stuff. You know, I reached out to a friend of mine who does a lot of like work with building email systems. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, listen, I want your help with something here to, you know, to get me to figure out how to do this MailChimp thing. So we are not flawless. We don't do it all well. You know, there's a lot of stuff to actually try to do. So we still are learning as we go. So yeah, guys, go and engage with everything Lee's doing. If you're not already following me, Andrew Coates Fitness on Instagram, I definitely want to interact with you there. Shoot me a message. And I've been getting some messages about people who've been reviewing the podcast, and I appreciate that. So, you know, 5-star review is better than 1-star, but go and review it. It doesn't take very long. It means a lot. And, you know, thanks everybody for tuning in today. Lee, always great to talk to you. And we will see you guys all again next week. I don't know my guest yet for next week, but I'll have something great for you.